Harshad Patel, Riya Patel, Mehul Desai, and Inspector Arjun Malhotra were all connected by blood, silence, and a secret that was buried in a landfill long before the truth came out. A secret that would turn a respected family into the center of one of the most disturbing crimes in the United States. Please subscribe for daily new update of Crime Story and watch till end. In 2018, the Patel family arrived in the United States carrying hope, fear, and the weight of starting over. They left behind a crowded neighborhood in Gujarat and settled in a quiet town in Ohio where streets were wide and neighbors rarely spoke beyond polite greetings. For Harshad Patel, this move was a chance to rebuild his life on his own terms. He was in his early 40s, disciplined, soft-spoken, and deeply concerned with how others saw him. Within a short time, he managed to establish a small logistics business that transported goods between nearby cities. The work was demanding, but it gave him status and respect among the local Indian community. People trusted him. They saw him as responsible and family-oriented. Harshad lived in a modest 2-story house on the edge of town. The house was clean, organized, and quiet. Everything followed a routine. That routine changed in 2020 when his niece, Riya Patel, arrived from India. Riya was 24 years old, curious about the world and excited about her future. She had been accepted into a nursing program and dreamed of building a career in healthcare. Moving to the USA felt like freedom to her. She believed this country would offer safety, opportunity, and independence. Living with her uncle seemed like the safest option. It allowed her to save money and adjust slowly to a new culture. At first, life felt stable. Riya focused on her studies, while Harshad continued his business. To outsiders, the household appeared normal. There were no loud arguments, no visible conflicts, and no signs of trouble. Neighbors later described the house as quiet, almost too quiet. As months passed, subtle changes began to appear. Riya spent more time alone in her room. Her energy faded. The excitement she once carried slowly disappeared. She stopped posting photos online and reduced contact with friends back home. Her routine became unpredictable. Some days she returned home late. Other days she barely left the house. These changes were small but important. They were signs that something unseen was growing beneath the surface. Harshad, on the other hand, became more controlling about household rules. He tracked expenses closely and monitored schedules. His concern for order appeared normal at first, but it quietly created pressure inside the house. Riya began feeling trapped between gratitude and discomfort. She depended on him for housing, immigration stability, and support, yet she felt increasingly unsafe without knowing why. The American dream that once felt bright slowly turned heavy. The house that symbolized protection became a place of tension. No one outside noticed. Teachers assumed stress from studies. Community members assumed adjustment issues. Everyone missed the warning signs because nothing dramatic had happened yet. This chapter of Riya's life was calm on the surface but unstable underneath. It was the beginning of a story that would later shock an entire community. At this point, no crime had been discovered, no police involved, and no questions asked. But the foundation for a tragic ending had already been laid, quietly and patiently, inside a house that looked perfectly ordinary from the outside. Riya's daily life slowly began to change in ways that were easy to ignore, but impossible to deny. Her attendance at college became irregular, and assignments that once reflected dedication now appeared rushed and incomplete. Professors noted this shift, but assumed it was pressure from living far from home. Behind closed doors, Riya was carrying a secret that weighed heavier with each passing day. A medical visit confirmed what she already feared. She was pregnant. The news did not bring joy or celebration. Instead, it filled her with anxiety and confusion. Riya did not share this truth with friends or relatives in India. Her phone showed no messages seeking advice or comfort. She erased browsing history regularly, yet fragments remained. Searches related to pregnancy clinics, legal rights, and emergency housing appeared late at night. These searches suggested fear rather than excitement. Her body also began to change, and she tried to hide it with oversized clothes and loose jackets, even indoors. She avoided mirrors and cameras, as if refusing to accept what was happening. The pregnancy was not the only secret. It was connected to something far more disturbing. Investigators later concluded that the identity of the father was deliberately hidden because revealing it would expose a reality too dangerous for Riya to face openly. This silence isolated her. Each day became a balance between survival and hope. She continued attending classes when she could, pretending that everything was fine, while internally planning an escape. At home, the atmosphere grew tense. Riya sensed constant observation. Simple movements felt monitored. The house, once a place of shelter, felt suffocating. She adjusted her schedule to avoid being noticed, waking early or staying out late. Her meals became irregular, and weight loss was visible despite the pregnancy. Stress had taken control of her body and mind. Medical records later showed missed follow-up appointments. Fear had stopped her from seeking consistent care. She worried about questions she could not answer and consequences she could not control. She was living between two realities, one visible to the world and one hidden behind silence. The longer the secret remained buried, the more dangerous it became. At the same time, Harshad's behavior subtly shifted. He became more alert, more tense. His movements around the house were calculated, his routines stricter. Financial stress added pressure, but it was not the main source of his anxiety. Something else was pushing him toward desperation. The pregnancy was not just a personal crisis. It threatened to expose years of control, secrecy, and manipulation. Riya began gathering documents quietly. Copies of her passport, visa papers, and college records were found later in a folder hidden inside her backpack. She was preparing to leave. She had searched for apartments and temporary shelters outside the Indian community. This step showed courage, but it also placed her in greater danger. The secret that Riya carried was no longer just her burden. It was a ticking clock. Every passing day increased the risk of discovery. The silence inside that house grew louder, and the truth pressed closer to the surface. What should have been a moment of new life instead became the reason a life was slowly slipping toward a tragic end. Harshad Patel's reputation outside the house remained untouched. To the community, he was reliable and disciplined, someone who followed rules and avoided trouble. His business trucks moved through the city daily, delivering goods on time, building trust with clients. Yet behind this structured image, pressure was slowly tightening around him. Financial records later revealed that his company was struggling. Contracts were being canceled, fuel costs were rising, and loans taken to expand the business were overdue. Every month pushed him closer to failure, and failure was something he could not accept. Inside the house, Harshad's personality showed a different side. Control mattered more to him than comfort. He kept strict schedules and expected silence, order, and obedience. Any disruption felt like a personal threat. Riya's presence in the house had already disturbed his routine, but her growing independence made things worse. He noticed her late nights, her guarded behavior, and the way she protected her phone. These details made him alert. He sensed that something was slipping beyond his control. As the pregnancy progressed, Harshad became increasingly careful. Investigators later discovered unusual purchases on his credit card statements. Heavy plastic sheets, industrial cleaning supplies, thick gloves, and large storage containers were bought from stores far from his neighborhood. At the time, these purchases raised no alarms. For a logistics business owner, such items could appear normal. But when placed alongside later events, they formed a disturbing pattern. Harshad's internet activity painted an even darker picture. Searches related to legal consequences, missing persons cases, and body disposal methods appeared late at night. These were not casual curiosities. They showed planning. He was not reacting emotionally. He was calculating outcomes. He wanted solutions that would leave no trace, no scandal, and no damage to his image. Despite the pressure building inside him, Harshad maintained a calm exterior. Neighbors saw nothing unusual. He continued attending community gatherings and religious events. He smiled, offered advice, and spoke about discipline and values. This double life allowed him to hide in plain sight. No one suspected that fear and desperation were driving his actions. At the same time, Harshad became more watchful of Riya. He noted her movements, tracked her schedule, and paid attention to the items she carried. When she began organizing documents and setting aside personal belongings, his concern turned into panic. He understood what those actions meant. She was preparing to leave, and leaving meant exposure. The pregnancy was no longer a secret he could contain. It had become a risk to everything he had built. His business, reputation, and social standing were all connected to silence. In his mind, losing control was worse than committing a crime. The idea of consequences did not stop him. Instead, it pushed him further into planning. This stage of the story marked a critical shift. The situation moved from hidden abuse and fear into deliberate preparation. Harshad was no longer just protecting a secret. He was creating a solution, one that, in his mind, would erase the problem completely. The calm routine of the house continued, but beneath it, a dangerous decision was forming, one that would soon change everything forever. The morning Riya disappeared began like any other day, quiet and ordinary on the surface. The sky was gray, and the temperature had dropped overnight. Her internship supervisor later confirmed that she never arrived at the hospital that day. Her phone, which usually showed some activity by early morning, went silent. There were no calls, no messages, and no location updates. It was as if Riya had vanished without warning. Inside the house, nothing appeared disturbed. Her room was neat, her bed made, and most of her clothes were still in the closet. Only a few personal items were missing, including her backpack and documents. To anyone looking briefly, it could appear that she had left willingly. This impression was exactly what Harshad wanted others to believe. When relatives called asking about Riya, he claimed she had decided to move to another state for work opportunities. He presented the story calmly, without emotion, as if it were a simple life decision. Days passed, and concerns slowly grew outside the house. Riya's college sent emails that went unanswered. Her friends noticed her sudden absence from online platforms. No goodbye message, no explanation, nothing. The silence felt unnatural. Eventually, the college reported her as missing, following standard protocol for international students. This step marked the first time authorities became involved. Police officers visited Harshad's house for a routine check. He appeared cooperative and composed. He repeated the same explanation, adding small details to make the story sound complete. He showed no signs of panic. The house revealed nothing alarming at first glance. There were no signs of a struggle, no visible blood, and no immediate evidence of a crime. Without strong indicators, the case remained low priority. Behind this calm appearance, Harshad was under extreme stress. His carefully constructed story required consistency. Any mistake could attract attention. Investigators later found that during this period, he deleted large amounts of data from his phone and computer. Location history was disabled, and search histories were erased. These actions suggested fear of discovery rather than innocence. Riya's bank account showed no activity after the day she disappeared. Her immigration records showed no travel. There were no bus tickets, no flight bookings, and no credit card usage. These details contradicted Harshad's explanation, but it took time for authorities to connect the dots. Missing person cases often begin slowly, and delays allowed the truth to remain hidden longer. Meanwhile, Harshad continued his routine. He went to work, attended community events, and maintained his public image. This normal behavior confused those who knew him. It created doubt. People questioned whether Riya had simply chosen to disappear. The idea of a young woman leaving quietly seemed more believable than the possibility of a crime inside a respected household. As weeks passed, pressure increased. Police expanded their investigation. They spoke to neighbors, reviewed surveillance footage in the area, and examined trash collection routes. Still, nothing directly pointed to Harshad. The disappearance remained a mystery, suspended between assumption and suspicion. What no one knew at the time was that the most important evidence had already been removed, hidden far from the house. The truth of what happened to Riya was buried beneath layers of planning and deception. The disappearance was not an escape. It was the result of a decision made long before that cold morning. And although silence protected the crime for a while, it could not protect it forever. Nearly 3 months after Riya vanished, the case took a grim turn that no one was prepared for. At the edge of a massive landfill outside Columbus, a worker noticed something unusual during routine sorting operations. What initially appeared to be discarded fabric revealed a horrifying truth. Human remains were discovered among layers of compacted waste. Authorities were immediately notified, and the area was sealed off. What began as a missing person case was now clearly something far darker. The condition of the remains made identification difficult. Exposure to weather, heavy machinery, and time had destroyed many recognizable features. Still, forensic experts worked carefully, knowing that even the smallest detail could speak for the dead. Bones were examined, tissue samples collected, and every fragment was documented. The process was slow and emotionally heavy. This was not just evidence. It was the end of someone's life. During the examination, investigators noticed a distinctive surgical marker on one of the bones. It matched the record of a childhood medical procedure Riya had undergone years earlier in India. Dental records were requested and compared. The match was confirmed. The remains belonged to Riya Patel. The confirmation brought both relief and devastation. The search was over, but the truth was unbearable. The autopsy revealed another shocking detail. Riya had been pregnant. This fact transformed the investigation instantly. The case was no longer about a disappearance or even a single murder. It now involved the death of an unborn child. The emotional weight of this discovery shook investigators. The pregnancy timeline matched the period before Riya went missing, proving that she had been carrying the child at the time of her death. News of the discovery spread quickly through the local Indian community. Shock turned into disbelief. Many had accepted Harshad's explanation and believed Riya had chosen to leave. Now that story collapsed completely. Police re-examined every detail from the beginning. Statements were reviewed, timelines reconstructed, and assumptions challenged. The landfill location became a critical clue. It was not random. It suggested planning and knowledge of waste disposal routes. Investigators began tracing garbage truck schedules and routes operating near Harshad's neighborhood during the week Riya disappeared. One route stood out. It matched the landfill where the remains were found. This connection raised serious questions. The odds of coincidence were low. The landfill was far from residential areas, and not a place someone would choose without intent. The discovery also revealed how much effort had gone into hiding the crime. Dumping a body in a landfill meant it could be buried under tons of waste within hours. It was a place designed to erase things. Whoever committed this act understood that. This realization shifted the focus toward someone methodical, someone familiar with logistics, schedules, and movement. For Riya, justice had been delayed, but not denied. Her body, though hidden, had been found. The landfill that was meant to erase her existence instead became the place where the truth surfaced. Investigators now had a body, a timeline, and a growing list of questions. The calm surface of the case was finally broken. From this point forward, there was no turning back. The investigation was no longer searching for answers. It was closing in on a killer. Once the remains were identified, the investigation moved quickly and with new intensity. Detectives shifted their full attention to reconstructing the days leading up to Riya's disappearance. Every movement, transaction, and digital trace was examined. What had once looked like an ordinary household now became the center of suspicion. Harshad's calm cooperation in the early stages was reinterpreted as something else entirely. It no longer looked like confidence. It looked like preparation. Garbage collection data became a key focus. Investigators requested detailed logs from the waste management company serving Harshad's neighborhood. These records showed exact pickup times, truck numbers, and landfill destinations. One truck, operating during the early morning hours just after Riya vanished, followed a route that ended at the same landfill where her remains were found. This connection narrowed the timeline and reduced the list of possible suspects dramatically. Security camera footage from nearby gas stations and traffic intersections added another layer. Late at night, Harshad's vehicle was captured traveling along the same route taken by the garbage truck. The timing aligned almost perfectly. The footage showed no hesitation, no wrong turns. This suggested familiarity rather than chance. The route was not commonly used by residents unless they had a specific reason to be there. Inside Harshad's garage, forensic teams uncovered evidence that had survived cleaning attempts. Tiny fibers, soil particles, and industrial plastic fragments were collected. Laboratory analysis confirmed that several samples matched materials found at the landfill site. These findings directly contradicted Harshad's earlier statements about Riya leaving on her own. The physical evidence was now speaking louder than words. Digital forensics revealed even more. Deleted search histories were recovered from Harshad's devices. These searches included information about landfill operations, decomposition timelines, and missing person investigations. The dates of these searches were especially damaging. They occurred days before Riya disappeared. This showed intent, not panic after the fact. It was clear that the crime had been planned. The most devastating evidence came from DNA analysis. Samples taken during the autopsy of the unborn child were compared against known family members. The results confirmed what investigators feared. Harshad was the biological father. This single fact rewrote the entire story. It explained the secrecy, the fear, and the desperate need to silence Riya. What had been suspected as abuse was now proven scientifically. Confronted with the evidence, Harshad's carefully maintained image collapsed. Every detail that once protected him now worked against him. His business knowledge explained the disposal method. His control over the household explained Riya's isolation. His calm demeanor explained how he avoided suspicion for so long. For investigators, the case was no longer about connecting clues. The picture was complete. Evidence from physical locations, digital records, and biological testing formed a single, unbreakable chain. Riya had been silenced to protect a secret that could not survive daylight. This chapter marked the moment when the truth fully emerged. The crime was no longer hidden behind uncertainty. It stood exposed, supported by facts that could not be erased. The silence that Harshad had relied on was gone. In its place stood proof, undeniable and permanent, waiting to deliver justice. As investigators pieced together the full sequence of events, the reality of what Riya had endured became impossible to ignore. The evidence no longer suggested a single act of violence driven by panic. It revealed a pattern of control that had developed slowly over time. Riya's isolation, her fear, and her secret preparations to leave were no longer confusing details. They were signs of long-term abuse hidden behind family trust and cultural silence. Riya had been living under constant pressure, depending on the very person who was harming her. Her immigration status, housing, and financial stability were all tied to Harshad. This imbalance of power made resistance dangerous. Investigators concluded that the abuse had begun months before the pregnancy and continued in silence. Riya's behavior changes now made sense. Her withdrawal was not weakness. It was survival. The pregnancy became the breaking point. It represented proof that could not be explained away. For Harshad, exposure meant total collapse. His standing in the community, his business, and his carefully controlled identity would all be destroyed. The fear of public shame outweighed fear of the law. In his mind, removing Riya meant removing the evidence. The planning showed a disturbing level of calculation. The choice of timing, the cleaning supplies, the landfill route, and the attempt to create a story of voluntary disappearance all pointed to a decision made well in advance. This was not a sudden loss of control. It was a deliberate act shaped by self-preservation. Riya's life was treated as an obstacle rather than a human being. Experts later noted that Harshad's behavior fit a pattern seen in hidden domestic crimes. Outward respectability often becomes a shield. Communities trust appearances, especially when family relationships are involved. This trust allowed the abuse to continue unnoticed and gave Harshad confidence that he could escape consequences. The most painful truth was that Riya had tried to escape. The documents she gathered, the shelter she searched for, and the plans she quietly made showed courage. She believed there was a future beyond fear. That belief likely accelerated the crime. Once Harshad realized he was losing control, he acted to regain it permanently. As the story became public, it forced difficult conversations within the community. Many struggled to accept that such a crime could exist inside a respected household. Others questioned how cultural silence and fear of shame had helped hide the truth. Riya's death exposed not only one man's actions, but also the environment that allowed them to continue unchecked. This stage of the case was no longer about mystery. It was about understanding motive and responsibility. Riya was not a victim of chance. She was a victim of trust betrayed at the deepest level. The shocking truth was not just the crime itself, but how long it remained invisible. And while Harshad had believed silence would protect him, it ultimately became the force that revealed everything. The arrest came quietly, without resistance or public spectacle. Harshad was taken into custody early in the morning, the same calm expression still fixed on his face. This time, however, it carried no authority. It was the calm of someone who knew there was nowhere left to hide. The charges were severe, reflecting the full weight of the crime. Murder, abuse, destruction of evidence, and additional charges connected to the unborn child ensured that the case would leave no room for leniency. Court proceedings exposed every layer of the story in detail. Evidence was presented methodically, leaving little space for doubt. Forensic reports confirmed the cause of death. Digital records established planning. Surveillance footage placed Harshad exactly where investigators said he was. The landfill route, the purchases, the erased data, and the DNA results formed a timeline that could not be broken. The image Harshad had spent years building collapsed under the weight of facts. The community response was deeply divided. Shock turned into grief, then anger. Many struggled with guilt, questioning how warning signs had gone unnoticed. Others focused on the broader issue of abuse hidden within families, protected by silence and fear of dishonor. Vigils were held for Riya, not just as a victim of a crime, but as a young woman whose future had been stolen before it could fully begin. Riya's name began appearing in awareness campaigns and college safety discussions. Her story became a lesson about vulnerability, especially for international students dependent on family support. Authorities reviewed policies related to welfare checks and missing student protocols, acknowledging that delays can cost lives. While no reform could undo the damage, her case forced institutions to confront uncomfortable truths. Harshad was eventually convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. The sentence reflected not only the brutality of the act, but the betrayal of trust involved. The courtroom remained silent as the judgment was read. There was no dramatic reaction, only finality. For Harshad, Control had ended. For Riya, justice had arrived too late, but it had arrived. In the years that followed, the house where the crime began stood empty. Neighbors avoided it, as if the walls themselves carried memory. The landfill where Riya's body was found returned to daily operation, but for investigators and family members, it remained a symbol of how carefully planned crimes can still fail. Riya's life ended in silence, but her story did not. It traveled far beyond the town where she died, reminding people that danger does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it hides behind familiarity, respect, and trust. The truth, once uncovered, proved stronger than fear. And though Riya could not be saved, her story ensured that she would not be forgotten.